space, and I'm Anthea, delighted to see you all, and particularly to welcome Emma and her work Time Frame as part of the Wallace annual residency that we run here. But does anybody need a stool or a chair? Would anybody else like a chair? We've got 40 of them. Together with Robert, we run the gallery here, so this is your first visit, you're very welcome. Some of you have come back before and other things. I suppose one of the exciting things each year for me, because I'm a bit of a passion of the story of Richard Wallace in Lisburn, if you want to know any more, you can talk to me afterwards, is our annual exhibition where I have the privilege of going to the Wallace Collection in London and introducing a Northern Irish artist. It's an open call. We do through our space, and Emma she phoned me, and I'm in the office. Anthea, I think I'd have put it in for the Wallace Residency, and I'm going, thank goodness. Number one, she was the first one, her application came in, she was the best one, and we're delighted to have you here, Emma, to share your side of the story, a few thoughts perhaps on your visit to London and to the Wallace Collection for the first time. So before I introduce to Emma, then there are drinks. Please help yourselves to the refreshments in the corner, and then there's some books and information, and there's also a secret tea towel for sale. And special discount today, 100% linen, and I'll show you that afterwards. So round of applause for Emma.
Thank you very much for coming. I have to say, first of all, I have to do a lot of thank yous because it was a real privilege to do this exhibition. It was a privilege to work with the Wallace Collection and their curators and their guides. Everybody was very, very generous with their time, and given the title is Time Frame, I think that worked very well. I had a wonderful week in the Wallace Collection in London, and it wasn't a collection that I knew very much about beforehand, but this this project was given a theme, and the theme was time frame, and I've always been interested in time. I've always been interested in how people measure time and the effect that time has on society and bigger pictures and things like that, as well as even just looking at a wristwatch and how that has changed from mechanical time to digital. So I was very interested in the subject area. I had an amazing time at the Wallace Collection, and I learned so much. I went to the Wallace with ideas in my head about gold, because I knew there would be a lot of gold, about water gilding and playing with gold leaf, and I thought this was wonderful, and I learned so much about the makers and the craftspeople and the guilds that were actually involved in producing this beautiful work for the aristocracy, for the people with the money. So when you go to the Wallace, you can see money all around you, because that is what they're doing, they're displaying wealth. And I was very, very interested in the stories behind that, because the pieces themselves are fabulous. They are sometimes so fabulous that sometimes they're not the most practical piece in the world. I mean, Robert and Anthea drew my attention to the astronomical clock, which is a main showpiece in the Wallace Collection. And when I was looking at all these lovely reference books before I went over, I thought, oh yes, that's probably a table clock. It might fit on something like that over there. And when I went, it was huge. It was enormous. It was bigger than a grandfather clock. And one of the very interesting things about it was Madame de Pompadour's banker who had commissioned it. There's a lot of wealth around it, but what they had done was put all their wonderful dials to tell solar time, astronomical time, main time, the whole works. They put them up here somewhere. So that is why I have, in this piece, you can barely see the dials for all the, as it were, the gold work around them. So it wasn't very practical as an actual timepiece. Talking of this piece, another wonderful thing that I found in the Wallace Collection was in their shop area. I'm very interested in, as I said, what the workers do, what people who actually make and who sell, those people who are behind all these wonderful works, what they do. In their shop area, they have a gorgeous shop, and they have these panels, cloth panels, that show gold furniture, which is decorated very like the black and gold piece here of Anthea and Martin's, or Anthea and Roberts, and they have panels that are printed that decorate all their shelves with all their stock behind it. So that gave me the idea to do this, to have a panel that would be very opulent, but that you would look behind to see what was going on behind the panel. So I have two pieces behind the facade. This one, what I did was, because I'm an embroiderer, I did some cut work and some gold work embroidery, and then I thought I would showcase what people would actually see if they were in my studio. So it's a lot of mess, it's a cup of coffee, there's paracetamol in there, it's always needed, and there's an awful lot of ends of stuff, because the whole thing about this work is thinking about what is used, what is discarded afterwards, what is oil, what is left behind after the piece emerges from it. I was saying about, how artisans actually work, and I did have a piece, as I said, I was very interested in guilds and the processes behind making and doing gilt surfacing, and I discovered that a lot of the pieces involved fire gilding, which is a process that uses mercury. And back in the days when they would have been making these pieces, it would have been your apprentices who would have made an amalgam paste of gold and mercury, by hand we're talking, and then part of the process is they get a chamois leather, they put the paste in and they squeeze out the excess mercury. So this piece over here is actually based on that. It still happens in Europe, but they have big extractor fans and things like that. But in places now, like Peru and Nepal, there are still people working with mercury in the same way. They're sitting on the ground, they have balls of mercury all over their hands and everywhere. It is very toxic, and there's still people making beautiful, I think in Nepal you get a lot of religious statuary and things like that is made in this way. So it's thinking about what happens behind that, and also about, if you know about the Mad Hatter, people understand that when you say about the Mad Hatter, because they use mercury in the process. Well, the gilders, it was even more so. So they had a short lifespan and a hard life ahead of them. When I was looking at Wallace and his antecedents, I was very interested in, there's so much story around him, and I was very interested in fortune and luck, and there but for the grace of God go us, and that led me down avenues where I was exploring, one person at an accident of birth has fortune and luck, and another person maybe doesn't have so much success in life because of that. I looked at a piece in the Wallace, which is an almanac. Almanacs are bonkers. Almanacs are really strange things. They're being used a lot by people. In the past, people were using an almanac for seasonality, so they could plant their crops and harvest and things like that. But there's also in all the almanacs I researched this little bit about fortune and getting your tarot read and crystals and cutting the chicken open and looking at the gizzards inside and things like that. So The almanac in the Wallace Collection was for Louis XV. Louis XV wanted this almanac. It's beautiful. It's in 4 panels, and it's beautiful gilding around it and porcelain insets. And you can take and change each of these porcelain insets. And there was 2 Italian ladies there that very kindly explained to me all the saints' days. So it was all the saints' days in these 4 panels. This is apocryphal, but I was told this by a curator at the Wallace. And she said that there was a saint's day for every day of the year, and on the saint's day, Louis wouldn't have to sleep with his wife. So apparently that's why he did it. Anyway, I took this as a theme to make this little piece over here, which is based on an almanac. It's movable, you can turn it, and you can open it, and all the pieces inside it can be shifted around because they're all on Velcro. So you can move them around, and they're based on the tarot. Because I thought, well, that's the closest to woo-woo stuff about your fortune and how you would look forecast, you know, in months or years or I suppose over your life. So I'm not particularly drawn to the tarot, but I thought it was a very good analogy for that piece. So, and then I had great fun making the time mugs. You'll notice there's some prints on the walls, and there are some actual physical time mugs, because these represent for me the workers. These are the people behind the work. So in all these, for example, the Fates over there is a piece that is using a time recorder. So that face, that clock face, would be what you would have, you know, when you went to stamp in for work in the morning. That's what you might have seen. And then the Fates on it are the 3 spiders, and they are measuring. There's a spinner that spins the line of your fate. There's the measure in the middle. He measures how she measures how long your life, what the span will be, and the cutter is the last one, and that one cuts your lifespan. So I was very interested in that. I have some little pieces on the lovely sideboard there, and one of note is a little coloured embroidery there. And I have to say, one of my favourite quotes learning about the Wallace was that Van Gogh said of Frans Hal, he had 25 shades of black, no, 27 shades of black, and Frans Hal was the painter of the Laughing Cavalier, which is a famous painting in the Wallace. And the Laughing Cavalier, I didn't think I would be drawn to, because it's one of those images, very iconic, and you think you know it. But when the curators were explaining about the piece, they were saying, well, they think because of this richly painted doublet and the lace, they thought perhaps he was a textile merchant, which immediately, me being into textiles, I thought, oh, okay. And when they were talking, they don't know much about him, but when they were talking about him, they thought also that the iconography of the embroidery was to do with love won and love lost. So it was really, aren't I the boy here? Around the block a bit. This is my Tinder profile. So what I did was I took a snapshot of that embroidery on that sleeve, and we had Frans Hal painting what somebody had embroidered at the time, and then me interpreting that and putting it in a small piece of embroidery. Yes, so has anybody any questions about any of the work? Do you want to know about the paper piece? As I say, I'm using a lot of paper in this exhibition, and this is what fascinates me, is people's compulsion to measure. They're measuring everything. You're measuring a person's worth, but you're measuring time, you're measuring seasons, and this is scientific paper that measures sound over time. So if you look closely at it, you'll see it has decibels, and then it has the days of the week, Monday, Tuesday, you know, day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, etc. So I was very interested in folding that because I thought, oh, that's folding time, which was a really attractive concept. And this big one in the middle, this is my sketchbook. So these are my thought processes about Wallace as I was making all the other work. Because I don't usually use a sketchbook, but I wanted some way to record what I was using. So in this you'll find notes, you'll find quotes, you'll find me going off on a tangent. For example, there's an awful lot of royalty represented in the Wallace Collection. I said about Louis XV. There's the Sun King as well, and it was around the time, well, it still is, Harry, dear love him, the heir and the spare. And I got very interested in kings, or potential kings, and their brothers. So there's a lot of that in there, and because of that, I put Freud in. So I was saying Freud's in there somewhere, so you can find Freud, rather than where's Wally, it's find Freud. So yeah, I will stop burbling. Does anybody have anything to ask, or?
Any questions, folks? Is work for sale? Would that be a question?
Did you do that as you went along?
Yeah.
Like a sketchbook then?
Like a sketchbook, but Bridget knows me too well. I don't usually use a sketchbook. I'm not a person who would plan everything before doing it, so it's an intuitive process. But what did happen is, while I was doing this, a lot of ideas changed in the pieces that I was working on. So yeah, it was side by side. Yeah.
And your workshop, Emma's running a workshop in June on Saturday the 25th?
Yeah.
24th?
24th.
And the Laughing Cavalier is a thing?
Yes, so what I was going to do was look closer at that concept. So look at the painting of the Laughing Cavalier and see all the iconography in it. And then maybe I have taken some small bits out of it, like a bee. So there is a bee that you can do other things, but there is a bee embroidery that you can do, so you could have a go at embroidering in the style of, yeah.
So that's bookable through ourselves at the gallery here. Any other remarks or questions? You do want to see the tea towel, don't you? You would have seen the banner outside, and
I have a tea towel. I would highly recommend them.
So 100% linen, and made by or produced by McCall Allen in Lurgan, and we just finished that big tea towel exhibition last month, and designed by Robert Peters. It's limited edition, and it's yours for £15, but we could do a deal for 2. So don't leave without your linen tea towel today. And any other questions about the Linen Biennale, which is coming up in August as well. So without further ado, I think we'll start the dancing now. Dancing around the book.
Yeah.
There are some reference books here, feel free, and as I said, if there are any questions about the Wallace Collection. And if you haven't been, please visit. It's in Manchester Square in London behind Selfridges, so it's a lovely day out. And do let them know you're from Northern Ireland, because the money that afforded the Hartfords the wealth to spend in the European auctions came from the tenant farmers in County Antrim, pretty much. So that's what made them what they were, the landowners here, and that's our distinct connection to there. So I like to remind the curators of that. So thank you, relax, and do you have some refreshments?